What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the first episode of Football Talk, and today we are going to jump on into our predictions for the Champions League round of 16. They start relatively soon, either this week or next. Hopefully, we do pretty well on these. There are some great matchups in here, and if you aren't planning on it, make sure you catch some of these. But let's not waste any more time. Let's just jump right on into it. We are not going to go in any particular order, so we're going to start off here. Atalanta, Valencia. We can start off talking about Atalanta a little bit. A very strange group stage, of course. Had no points from the first three games and then ended up second place with 7 points. A low total for a team to come out of a Champions League group, but to get out of the group after having 0 points off the first three games is pretty impressive in itself. A normally hot and cold team, they're very difficult to gauge. A lot of days they just don't show up. A lot of days they have some incredible wins. They have some absurd wins on their resume. A 7-0 over Torino, a 5-0 over Milan, a 7-1 over Udinese. And then they have those really worrying results. They have that 2-1 loss at home to Spal very recently, that 4-0 to Zagreb to start the group stage as well. The 2-2 very recently to bottom three Genoa at home. So they have some good results, some unbelievable results, and then some really, really poor results. It's difficult to gauge a team like that, whether it's coaching or mentality or whatever it may be, just youth in general. That happens to a lot of young teams, though they do have some experienced heads over there. So there's a lot to deal with, a lot to process there. It's a bit of a worry, depending on which team may show up for both legs. One leg, you never know, but we'll have to see. Valencia, on the other hand, they won their group on the final day. A pretty impressive group win as well. Chelsea and Ajax in the group. It's pretty impressive to come out on top with two difficult teams in there. Had to win away from home on the final day to get through, and they beat Ajax 1-0 to go ahead and win the group. At the moment in the league, though, sitting 2 points behind a Champions League spot, which is where obviously I assume they want to be. They're having a pretty decent year, but I think they'd like to be a little bit further along. One thing that's pretty impressive is they're getting some decent results against the top teams. They have a draw in there over Real Madrid, a 2-0 over Barca, which is very recent, which is coming along very well. The defense is pretty good. It's keeping them in games. The worry sometimes with them is going forward. Only once in their last 11 games have they scored 2. Just in general, they haven't scored more than 2 in any of those 11, and only once did they hit 2. The defense, as you can see with just those numbers, is keeping them in games. It's going to be, a difficult kind of tie for them. Going to Italy here against a team that's kind of on and off. Whether they show up, if the attacking team can show up, if Valencia can score goals, it'll be very difficult for Atalanta. We'll have to see. But you just don't know with Valencia at the moment scoring goals. They have a really tough game against Atletico Madrid right beforehand. Their form may be down by then. A 3-0 loss to Getafe very recently. Before this Atletico game coming, it's going to be very difficult. They may have to be picking themselves up for a tough loss or, a couple of games now without a win. But we'll have to, wait and see. But the 3-0 loss to Getafe very recently doesn't bode well with Atletico coming. So hopefully their spirits are up and ready to roll. Or maybe they're just jumping into a new competition and just thinking that they can go ahead and cause some problems. As for the matchup itself, this is very much either way for me. A very difficult call. As we were saying, Valencia, they're just not scoring goals. They're just not. Defensively, though, is where they're very strong. Atalanta, we were talking about them. They're very on and off, cold. Sometimes hot, sometimes. We'll have to see. But I think Valencia are the better team, the more consistent team. Atalanta, just too many big wins, too many really bad results. Valencia have been straightforward, to say the least. While they're not scoring tons of goals, they're not conceding really any either. Just more consistency mostly out of Valencia. I just think they're the better team, and if they can keep it right defensively, I think they'll eventually win this tie. So I like them to go through. Valencia to go through 4-1 on aggregate. Next matchup we have is Liverpool and Atletico Madrid. Atletico Madrid, second in their group, behind Juventus. And they're kind of going okay in the league in that fourth position. But, for them, it's kind of underperforming. 13 points back of leaders Real Madrid. They're going to have a really, a tough fight on their hands for that top 4 spot. And before the Liverpool game, they've got a very tough game against Valencia, who are just 2 points back. It's going to be very much a case of, trying to focus on 2 different competitions. Whether they're fully available for everything, we'll have to see. And lately, they have had trouble scoring goals. They tried to bring in a striker in January, tried to bring Cavani in, couldn't pull that transfer off, ended up bringing Carrasco back from China in on loan. Carrasco's still a very good player, but not necessarily a goal scorer up front for them. We'll have to see. We'll have to also see who's fit. João Felix and Diego Costa racing against the clock. Diego Costa especially, to try and be fit for this. We will have to see who's ready and available, but their goal-scoring exploits as of late, it's not something you would really look toward to carry them through. Normally, it's very much defensively, and defensively, they just don't seem to be what they were 2 or 3 years ago. It's very difficult to compare them to the teams a couple years ago, but when you're not scoring more goals, you have to lean back on that defensive ability, and it's just not as it was a few years back. As for Liverpool, there's not really too much more you can say about Liverpool. Unbeaten in the league, only 1 draw all season in the Premier League of their 24 games or 25 games. Their only first team loss was to Napoli in the group stage. Napoli love a game against Liverpool. They've been breaking records left and right, and we will see. It's only a matter of time, surely, before they win the Premier League. Whether they have time to focus on the Champions League as well, I'm sure Jurgen Klopp will be up and ready for this. I think with their position in the league, he can afford to focus more on the Champions League just a little bit before the league, in these types of positions. He'll have Norwich, Atletico Madrid, West Ham. He can, if he wants to, he can surely rest in some of those Premier League games. As for the matchup itself, this kind of screams low scoring. Atletico Madrid don't like to concede goals. Liverpool, ever since Joe Gomez and Alisson have come back, have been rock solid defensively. Clean sheet after clean sheet, really, with Liverpool. But for me, the location of leg 1 is incredibly pivotal. I can't even speak. It's incredibly pivotal to where this goes. It's going to be in Madrid, leg 1 here, and you feel that Liverpool, if they can grab an away goal, or if they can score first in Madrid, make it, an early goal, and Atletico Madrid have to come out a little bit, then you can see Liverpool really playing to their strengths, playing open football on the counter-attack. They really want teams to come on to them to break forward and open up that space. If Atletico Madrid concede early, this could be 3, 4, 5 for Liverpool. But if Atletico Madrid get through the first leg, maybe it's 0-0, maybe they win 1-0, then we have a real tie on our hands here. Unfortunately, Liverpool, I just think they always find a way. I think they'll score in Madrid, and I think they're going to end up winning this tie 3-0 on aggregate. Next, we have Juventus and Lyon, and we'll start with Juventus, who have been doing very well in Serie A, tied top of the table. I believe they're technically second to Inter on goal difference, but, tied top of the table for what it's worth. Won their Champions League group that has Atletico Madrid and Leverkusen in it, which is a decent group, and won it relatively easily. Ronaldo, of course, scoring goals for fun. It's been like 10 or 11 games in a row, I believe he scored in Serie A. He is on form, and Ronaldo on goal scoring form is very, very difficult to deal with. But there's also a little thing in there that worries me just a little bit. They're having trouble against the top end of Serie A, which you can look at it a couple different ways. You can look at it as they're having their off days against big teams, or maybe they're just not the force that you may think they are when it comes to it. They're ultra consistent in that aspect, and they beat the teams they should beat, but when it comes to the other teams, maybe they're just flattering to deceive by not going ahead and collecting those results you would expect of them. Either way, it may not come to fruition in a tie like this. But we will have to see. Something you may want to just, take a look at. But we will have to see in a very tough Champions League tie. Lyon, on the other hand, have had a not so great season by their standards. 8 points off a Champions League spot, sitting down in mid-table in League One, though they are off to the Coupe de la Ligue final, so they'll take some solace in that. But it's not that it's a difficult kind of year for them. They're conceding goals. They're scoring pretty well, but they're not, keeping enough clean sheets, and they're not having enough games where they are outscoring their opponents, and that's why they sit down mid-table. As for the tie, another that hinges very heavily on the first leg. It is in France, and you feel here that if Lyon don't win this game outright, then this could possibly get ugly. If Juventus grab a goal or two, grab a result, you just don't see Lyon going to Turin and grabbing a result that would keep them through. You just don't see it. I think Juventus do grab an early lead in France. I think they win that opening game. I think they win both games. And I think Juventus advances 6-2 on aggregate. Tottenham versus Leipzig, a very tasty tie. We'll start with Tottenham here, who have had, a not-so-great year, if they would consider it. They're currently sitting in 6th with a game in hand that could bring them up to 5th. But, they fired a manager. They've had to move on from their best player. It's been a very tough year for Tottenham fans, but they are still in a pretty decent position considering the issues they have had so far. Aging, thin squad, a new manager trying to almost figure out what the deadwood is really as he goes forward. He's also seemingly trying to find a more attacking style of play. It seems that he's trying to tweak what his old system was of, holding firm, holding what we have. It seems a little bit more open. We'll see how that goes on. I think he's just tweaking and looking at things, and I think he thinks this year is kind of a dead season. But knowing him, he'll go all out in cup competitions. A team can win on any day, and he does love to bring silverware back. It's his speciality. I imagine you can guess from, but we'll see. As of late, their form has been a touch better, but still not brilliant. They've been collecting results against some bigger teams that kind of flatter to deceive. A win over Manchester City the other day in which they were thoroughly outplayed. They've collected 4 points from City and have been thoroughly outplayed both times, but have been collecting the results, which is, in a situation like this in the Champions League, it's obviously incredibly important to just go out and grab those results. So we'll see how they play against a really tough German side, and if they can eke out results regardless of their performances. Leipzig, on the other hand, having a really good season. Only 1 point back of Bayern after their draw away from home the other day. They have one of those even groups which anybody can come out of. But they've done well to go ahead and, of course, win that group. And they're filled with talent, which they added to in the January transfer window. Dani Olmo, bringing him in. He's a really good player, a young player. They are filled with good young players, aren't they, Leipzig? Just all over the shop. Timo Werner, Upamecano, Dani Olmo. It's just front to back, young, good talent. And maybe the last few years, the young kind of mentality shows a little bit. They win a few games they shouldn't. They lose a few games they should win. But they've, sitting second in the Bundesliga right now, they're starting to show that kind of more experience. It's really starting to kind of peek through the young cracks in the team. But as for a head-to-head, this is a really, really tight kind of tie. What I'm kind of looking forward to here, two teams who can dig out low-scoring results, 1-0, a 2-0, but two teams that also are filled with attacking talent. Timo Werner, Lucas Moura, Heung-min Son. There is just talent aplenty in the forward areas. So it seems almost like a low scoring, but there could be some goals popped around. I'm just feeling the edge goes toward Leipzig, though. I think defensively they're better. They're younger, more skilled, more powerful. And I think defensively, in a game filled with attacking talent, I think defensively is where this tide turns just a little bit. Leipzig, just to eke this one out, I like them to go 4-3 on aggregate. Next, we have Chelsea-Bayern, and a tale of two teams here, really. Chelsea, on the surface, are probably having a pretty decent year. New manager, no summer business after the transfer ban, and they started really well. And they opened up a pretty large gap between 4th and 5th place originally. But since, it's fallen off quite a bit. And now they still sit 4th, but at the moment, gap to 5th place, only 2 points. And they did get their transfer ban lifted for January, where they could have signed players, and then they didn't sign anybody. And unfortunately, that's kind of left them in a really bad spot. They really need a striker, and they have some issues. Only 2 wins from 10 in the Premier League is obviously incredibly worrying. Bayern, on the other hand, have had a reverse kind of fortune here. Started off very poorly. Niko Kovac was eventually sacked, and since have had quite the turnaround. They had a 0-0 with Leipzig recently, which leaves them on top of the table that they were, well behind earlier on in the year. 6 of the last 7 they've won, and the real big thing there is taking 7 of 9 points from their closest rivals, the top 4 really, and that really, taking points from your rivals and continuing to win will make up that gap pretty quick, which they have done, and they sit top of the Bundesliga. They've also been scoring goals for fun as of late. A 4-0 over Dortmund, a 5-0 over Schalke, a 4-0 over Hertha Berlin, hitting form at the right time. A couple of months ago, you kind of see this as probably one of the more even ties in the entire round, but at the moment you kind of fear for Chelsea going down on a spiral, really spiraling almost out of control against the team in Bayern who are really flying up and flying high. It's very tough. But one thing for me which really stands out in here is the striker position. Chelsea wanted to bring in a striker, wanted to move Giroud on, couldn't. Batshuayi, I don't think he trusts. And Tammy Abraham has been almost playing hurt. He was hurt the other day or recently, and they've rushed him back. He's still playing, and he's scored 15 goals on the year, but 7 of which came in the first 3 games, and he's only had 8 since in all competitions. It's, a big drop-off, and it's difficult here. And his opposite number, Lewandowski, been firing on all cylinders all year long. I think this tie really turns on the predatory finishing of Lewandowski. I think right there really shows the fortunes of each team. Started off well, Chelsea. Abraham scoring goals, and since fallen off, he's not scoring goals. Lewandowski has been scoring goals for fun all year long as Bayern really start to have an upward tick. I think they end up taking it from Chelsea here. You just back them and Lewandowski over Chelsea and Tammy Abraham. Bayern win 5-1 on aggregate. Next we have Napoli and Barcelona. A pretty strange tie, all things considered. Napoli, of course, having an awful, awful season. They found their way out of the group. They're the only team to beat Liverpool all year long, or beat Liverpool's first team all year long. Villa have a win in there over the Kids, but they're also 11th in the league and are closer to a relegation spot than they are to the Champions League spots. And it's just strange all around. They sacked their manager Ancelotti early on. The owner had a row with the players over suspensions and other things like that. Money. It's been a very, very, very strange year for Napoli, who have sort of turned it around just a little bit lately. They have a win over Juventus, a 2-1 in the league, and then a Coppa Italia win over Lazio. But other than that, they've been just playing very, very poorly. Recently losing 3-2 at home to Lecce kind of compounds on it, and it's just been downhill all year long. They've been leaking goals. The forwards have having a hard time kind of holding on and keeping up with the amount of goals they concede. There are days when they don't concede goals and don't score any. There are days where they concede 3 goals and score 2. It's a very, very strange situation over in Naples. Barcelona, on the other hand, are having an okay season by their standards, I suppose. 3 points off the top of La Liga, and they won their Champions League group, which is pretty much a minimum for them. Their issue at the moment, though, seems like when you watch it, it's not exactly impressive. It's been almost sneaking by and, grabbing results late and, holding on to Messi and hoping he helps. It's very strange. Wins over lower end teams, of course. And here's a weird stat for those who like these sort of things. Barcelona haven't beaten a top 9 team in La Liga in any competition since the 1st of December. No wins in 5, 2 draws, 3 losses. It's very, very strange stuff that's happening over at Barcelona right now. You struggle to determine whether they're good, whether they're bad, whether they're just average. Of course, adapting to a new manager after Valverde was sacked, but even the new manager is struggling to get them to adapt the way they want to the way he wants them to play. So we'll see how it goes. You worry for this Barcelona team, though, when they did run out of ideas. They kind of just let Messi have the ball and hope he turns some magic in, kind of like the Argentina teams the last few years. It's a very strange situation over there, which makes for a pretty interesting time. It makes for a pretty interesting tie. Can't even speak today. There's talent everywhere for both teams, up and down the pitch. It just seems to be collective form is just, it's not really great. This tie last year would have been something else. That would have been a must-watch TV. But this year, it's just very strange. It's just 2 teams who are, one team is really bad. Barcelona, you don't know if they're quite good enough at the moment. They're kind of, It's just a very, very strange, tie that we've got here, which is why I'm leaning Barcelona. They are a little bit more consistent. They don't have really ugly losses. They've been at least keeping up in La Liga, while they haven't beaten any top half teams in a long time. They're at least keeping up. Napoli, on their day, can cause an upset, as you saw with Liverpool earlier on in the year. I just don't know if they have the consistency to go ahead and beat Barcelona over a 2-legged affair. I like Barcelona to go through 5-2 on aggregate. PSG and Dortmund. This should be a fun one. Paris having one of their usual years in League One, walking right through it. They're on top of the table right now. Hold 12 points, just cruising. It's ridiculous. In League One, they've scored 23 more goals than anyone and also conceded the least amount. It is not even close over there. And that's what makes it so difficult to gauge their European performances year in and year out, because the competition in League One just isn't that good. They won their group, though, in relatively convincing fashion. They won 5 and drew 1. They took 4 points off Real Madrid, who are one of the form teams in the competition at the moment. So we'll see how it goes. They're just incredibly difficult to gauge. But they do still have one of the potent attacking forces, Neymar, Mbappe, Icardi. There is just still talent all over the place there. As for Dortmund, sitting third, could be fourth once Mönchengladbach play their game in hand. That might be happening today. I'm not so sure, but it is what it is. They may be four. They're only 4 points back of Bayern, which is a position they're probably comfortable with, challenging in and around the top there. But at the moment, I feel they have some other issues. Their biggest one is the amount they concede against the top teams they've been playing. And most recently, there are some results in there that are, kind of difficult to wrap your head around when you play some of the big teams. They conceded 4 against Munich, 4 against Leverkusen the other day recently, 3 against Leipzig very recently. It's a worrying trend. And up against a team like PSG, you worry about that particular stat alone. They've got some good attacking players going forward. Haaland has been a good acquisition, but still only 19 and still has some time to grow. Sancho, of course, doing well. There's some good attacking talent, but defensively, if they're going to concede like that against top teams, it's almost dead on arrival. And while PSG Dortmund screams a very close, high-scoring affair, this tie to me doesn't seem as close as others would think. I think while PSG and Dortmund are both good football teams and they've been consistently good football teams for a while now, I just think Dortmund's style plays right into PSG's hands. Dortmund, when they bring men forward, they like to use the wingbacks. The wingbacks like to get forward, and they like to overwhelm you while holding onto the ball with their incredible attacking talent, really, with the support of the midfield and the wingbacks coming forward. I just think that plays right into PSG's hands. They're going to leave gaps. PSG have incredible pace and talent out wide with Mbappe and Neymar. Icardi through the middle as well. Just incredible movement from those three. And I just don't think that Dortmund can keep up with the goal scoring that PSG have. I think in the end, PSG get an early goal. It's going to be very difficult. Dortmund are going to have to come out and play against the team that want you to come out and play and leave gaps. It's going to be very, very difficult. I just don't see it. I just don't see Dortmund keeping up here. They're going to have to really come and score plenty of goals, Dortmund, without conceding as much as they have been conceding against the top teams lately. I just don't see it. PSG to win this one 7-3 on aggregate. Real Madrid, Manchester City, what is probably the tie of the round, we'll save for last. Real Madrid, one hell of a run. They lost the other day 4-3 to Sociedad in the Cup, and that was their first loss in 23 games, which in most of these top leagues is incredibly difficult to do. They're currently top of the league over Barcelona and playing pretty well. My issue with Real Madrid is that there are too many draws against the top-tier teams in their division. In the Champions League group, when they played the top-tier team being PSG, they only took 1 point from a possible 6. There was a specific run in La Liga where they had 3 games in a row, Valencia, Barcelona, and Athletic Bilbao, where they scored 1 goal over the entire 3 games, and they drew all 3 games, 2 0-0s and a 1-1 against Valencia there. That kind of form against these big teams is a little bit worrying. Sure, of course, you don't want to lose to these big teams, but, at some point to get through in the Champions League, you're going to have to win some of these games, and it's going to be very difficult against a good Manchester City side. City, of course, have had a poor year by their standards. They're 22 points back of Liverpool, 6 losses already, which is unheard of for them at this stage, and the back four is just not that great, and it's incredibly thin. They've been resting players recently to try and kind of counteract that, try and get ready for this Real Madrid tie. But you also worry because if they're sleepwalking through Premier League games and just only waking up for Champions League games, whether you can get out of that second gear for the entire 180 minutes, it's going to be difficult to see. They have games where they they look like their old selves where they're free scoring and just holding on to the ball, but they also, have games this year where they're not scoring any and, struggling to keep other teams out, especially on the break where things are wide open. They're just not having one of those Manchester City type of years. And as for, for the tie itself, this is probably must watch in terms of this round. This is probably where the action will be. We'll see how this one goes. This one can definitely go either way. I think it's the most evenly matched ones. There are some other ones in there. I think Valencia and Atalanta are relatively evenly matched as well. But for me, Madrid edge it just defensively a little bit. They had a really poor defensive game recently, but I just trust their defense more than City's defense, and that's saying a little bit because I don't necessarily trust Madrid's defense, but City's defense has been so poor for a year and a half now, and they really haven't dealt with it too much. They had the summer and January to bring a defender in. They didn't. That injury to Laporte really killed their season almost, with Fernandinho playing back there. It's just defensively a mess. I just don't know. I just don't know if City are awake for this tie necessarily. As we were saying, they seem to sleepwalk through the Premier League at the moment. They're resting players, just getting ready for this Real Madrid tie. I wonder if that will come back to bite them. I'm leaning Real Madrid. I think they just sneak through here. I like them to go through 5-4 on aggregate. The 8 winners we have: Liverpool, Real Madrid, Valencia, Paris, Leipzig, Bayern, Juventus, and Barcelona. That would be a fun last 8, wouldn't it? There are just some good teams in there. And hopefully we are, I'd like to be right on these, but football is a funny thing. But that should do it. One more thing before we go. We're just going to guess the matchups. The more you look at the random drawings they have for tournaments and things, the less random they seem to become. We'll see if we can guess the 4 matchups after the 8 teams we got through. I'm liking Liverpool, Leipzig, Real Madrid, Valencia, Barca and Juventus, Bayern and Paris. If we get all 8 right, and then we go ahead and get the matchups right too, well, this will probably be the only video I make on this channel. But for now, guys, I hope you have enjoyed it. Stay tuned. We're going to be doing plenty of things like this. They're going to be podcasty, football related, all football related. And if you like that sort of stuff, hit the subscribe button and join me next time around, guys. But that's it for now. So peace.